Something just went very wrong inside the Indiana Fever. And it didn't start on the court. It started with a single comparison made during what was supposed to be a routine public discussion about the future of the franchise. The kind of event where executives lay out their vision, deliver polished talking points, and move on without incident. But buried inside that conversation was a line that nobody in that room expected to become national news. And the moment it hit the internet, everything moved fast. Within hours, fans weren't just confused, they were furious. Before anyone could even receive a proper explanation, the person at the center of it all vanished from public view entirely. Here is exactly what was said. The Fever's front office was explaining the organization using a corporate tech ecosystem analogy. The concept was simple: the franchise is the product, the system is the focus, and every element works together to produce value. The framing was designed to sound structured and strategic, but then came the comparison that changed everything. Caitlin Clark was described as the phone case, not the phone. The case, the accessory, the element that supports the system rather than the one that drives it. The sold-out arenas, the record-breaking TV numbers, the sudden explosion of national attention, none of that existed before Caitlin Clark arrived. She was selected #1 overall by the Indiana Fever in the 2024 WNBA draft, coming out of the University of Iowa, where she broke the all-time NCAA scoring record with 3,951 points. By the time her first professional season began, the league was operating in a fundamentally different commercial environment than it had been just 12 months earlier. Arenas that used to have empty sections were suddenly packed. Games that once drew regional audiences were now national television events. ESPN viewership records connected to WNBA broadcasts were broken multiple times across a single season. Sponsorship interest expanded, merchandise sales surged across the country, and the organization chose this moment to position the engine behind all of that growth as the accessory. Social media exploded. Within minutes of the clips circulating online, every major platform flooded with reactions, breakdowns, and commentary. The question appearing over and over was identical. Did they really just say that? Season ticket holders were some of the first to speak up. These were not casual observers jumping into a trending conversation for engagement. These were people who had invested financially in this franchise through years of losing seasons and consistent irrelevance. To them, this comment did not register as a poorly chosen analogy. It read as the organization minimizing the only reason the Fever were suddenly a team people outside Indiana cared about at all. Then the national media caught up. Clips spread across every major sports platform. Headlines stopped asking whether the comment was a mistake and started asking what it actually revealed. Was this genuinely how the front office viewed Caitlin Clark? Was the framing deliberate, or was it something more damaging? Was it simply honest? And just as the expectation of some kind of organizational response built to its peak, nothing came. The executive at the center of the storm deleted her Twitter account without a single explanation. No statement, no clarification, just gone. Overnight. At precisely the moment when the pressure was at its loudest. Because when someone in that position disappears instead of addressing the situation, it raises a much bigger question. What exactly were they trying to avoid? Silence in a crisis moment does not de-escalate anything. It redirects attention inward and raises the temperature of every question already being asked. If the comment was a misunderstanding, a simple explanation would have ended it. If it was taken out of context, a correction was available. The decision to provide neither stopped feeling like oversight and started feeling like something intentional. The deeper you look at this situation, the clearer it becomes that this was not simply a communication failure. Reports suggest the organization didn't see it coming, not the scale of Clark's impact, not the velocity of it, not the structural demands it would place on every corner of the franchise. There was no real roadmap for what to do when one player suddenly becomes the center of the entire sport's attention. No infrastructure was built in advance to manage the national media pressure, the commercial scrutiny, or the expectations that followed her arrival. The Fever were operating at one level and were suddenly being asked to function at an entirely different one without preparation. Instead of leading the moment, they've been reacting to it. Messaging has been inconsistent, public communications have felt disconnected from the reality visible to anyone watching from the outside. And that phone case comment starts to look less like carelessness and more like an attempt, conscious or not, to reclaim control of a narrative that had already moved beyond the organization's reach, to position the franchise back at the center of a story it no longer leads. That kind of internal tension has a way of breaking through, and when it didn't come from outside the building. Sophie Cunningham didn't tiptoe around it. On her podcast, she addressed what had been building inside the locker room for weeks, possibly longer. The tone was not emotional. It was measured and deliberate. She talked about the physical play Caitlin Clark has been dealing with, the hits, the missed calls, the growing frustration around officiating that many observers noted had not matched the standard of protection typically extended to a player of Clark's documented commercial significance to the league. But Cunningham went further than officiating. The broader message was clear. There is a feeling within the Fever's locker room that the organization has not fully aligned itself with what Clark represents, that instead of committing decisively to the moment, there has been resistance. This wasn't frustration after a tough game. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. Reports suggest this was calculated, a deliberate decision to speak openly with complete awareness of how it would land and what it would signal to everyone watching the situation develop. Sophie Cunningham's behavior on the court had already been making the same argument. When Clark absorbs contact and officials do not respond, Cunningham responds, directly and repeatedly, game after game. Her podcast statement was not a shift in position. It was the verbal version of something she had been expressing physically throughout the entire season. And once a player inside a locker room crosses that line, speaking publicly about what was supposed to stay internal, the situation stops being a private matter. It becomes something the entire league is watching. What this has exposed is a genuine divide within the organization. On one side, the institutional belief that the franchise and its system must always hold priority, that no individual player sits above the brand. On the other, the observable reality that Caitlin Clark is specifically the reason the system commands any national attention at all. The crowds, the ratings, the expanded sponsorship conversations, the merchandise numbers, they all trace back to one source. Holding both of those realities simultaneously is not a sustainable position, and the longer the organization attempts to maintain it, the more visible the fracture becomes. This pattern has appeared before. In the 1980s, when Michael Jordan joined the NBA did not immediately restructure itself around him. Physical play went unchecked. The team dynamics did not align with his level of impact. The NBA hesitated. But Jordan was the product. He was the reason viewership was growing at a pace the NBA had never seen. And eventually, everything shifted. Not because leadership decided it was strategically sound, but because the alternative was no longer viable. Officiating changed. Marketing changed. The entire commercial identity of the league adapted around what one player represented. The comparison being drawn now is not about the players. It is about the pattern. A generational talent arrives, attention surges beyond anything the existing system anticipated, the system resists, and reality wins. Hesitation in moments like this isn't neutral, it's costly. Every week the Fever spend managing this tension rather than resolving it is a week this moment is being misused. The Indiana Fever are sitting on something rare, something valuable, something that could define their future for years to come, only if they handle it the right way. Caitlin Clark will continue producing at the level that changed this franchise's relevance in the first place. The sold-out buildings, the television numbers, and the national attention will continue regardless of what gets decided inside the front office. The question is whether the people making those decisions will align with what they have before the window on this moment begins to close. Reports and speculation are already circulating about what comes next. Nothing has been confirmed, but the fact that those conversations are happening at all tells you exactly where the situation is heading. And the next move in this story may not wait much longer.
That's all for now. Like and follow for more.